Having the right setter and having the right system in place that allows a setter to book a bunch of meetings every single week is exactly what allowed me to scale my AI marketing agency from about $15,000 per month to $50,000 per month, where it's at the moment, and be able to go from booking just only about 2 to 4 calls per week on the calendar. As you can see right here, this is the before section, and now these blue events are new sales calls booked on the calendar. I used to book only about 2 to 4 calls per week on the calendar to actually then being able to book upwards of 10 plus meetings every single week consistently on the lower end essentially. And in this video, what I want to do is I want to walk you through exactly how I've been able to do that so that you can pretty much implement the exact same structure after this video as well. And I'll basically walk you through the exact step-by-step process that actually allows my team of sellers to book upwards of 10 calls per week with ideal clients for my marketing agency, but then also how you can actually find these sellers, where you can hire them from, and things like that. And then lastly, how much to pay them, how to pay them, and also what's the proper way to actually incentivize them to make sure that they book a lot of qualified calls on your calendar with businesses that are looking for AI services. Now, before I do that though, let me first walk you through a quick backstory, because for the longest time ever, what I actually used to do in my marketing agencies is I used to just primarily rely on cold outreach. I did not run any ads, anything like that. So I used to basically reach out to people on Instagram with cold DMs and emails. Part of that I was doing myself, and a part of that I was doing with a team of other sellers. But the issue that I always had was that I was not able to scale those agencies to more than 20K per month consistently. And the reason is of the fact that I was just simply not able to book consistent meetings every single week, and I was only able to book about 2 to 3 to maximum 4 meetings per week on the calendar, and really no more than that. If I try to scale and send more cold DMs or cold emails, then the issue was that the quality of the prospects was going down, and that not necessarily yielded into more appointments because the quality of the list wasn't that good. So it was only after a couple of years that I actually realized that the most predictable and scalable way of booking meetings for your marketing agency is through literally using Facebook ads. And so what I realized back then was that in order for me to actually book meetings through Facebook ads, I need to actually call those leads immediately as they come in, and call them on the phone to pre-qualify and actually book them in on the calendar. And I knew that all the methods that I've used in the past, such as cold DMs, cold emails, is not something I can do right here, because it's not like we would generate the lead from Facebook and then we would send them a cold email saying that, hey, we saw that you came in, are you interested to book a call? Obviously, we do have all the automations in place for actually incentivizing people to book calls with us once they come as a lead, but that's not the main way of booking appointments with people that come from the ads. You need to have a system in place where you actually call these people right away as they opt in to have a conversation, then book them in your calendar. And so I didn't really have that, right? And the thought of me hopping on these calls myself to book these leads on the calendar is something that just made me feel completely sick, because that was the last thing that I wanted to do. And also partially it's because of the fact that I'm not in the US time zones. So if I would have been doing that myself, then I would have had to take calls very late in the night. And on top of that, also, it's not something that you can do as the owner yourself, because if your goal is to scale to 50K, 100K per month, or even more than that, you can't do that by calling the leads yourself, in a sense, right? So you need to have a team in place that actually does it for you. So really, as I thought about it, I realized that this resistance is just simply going to make me give up on the business significantly quicker than I actually get to a point where I start booking some meetings. So what I decided to do is actually decided to hire a phone setter, and his responsibility was very simple. What he usually, was doing was that he called every single lead ASAP as they came in, and basically the goal was to qualify them and book them in on the calendar, right? And the moment I did that, my calendar basically went from booking just 2 to 3 meetings per week to now booking 10 plus meetings per week very, very consistently. That was the situation that I experienced pretty much right away when I switched from doing cold outreach to actually running ads for the agency. So let me actually walk you through the process of the system that actually allows the seller in the first place to book 10 plus meetings per week. And then after that, I'm going to walk you through where you can actually hire the right sellers, how to incentivize them, and things like that. So like I said, the best way is through literally using Facebook ads, okay? So you use Facebook ads. You don't need to have a huge budget if you don't have a big budget. I started off with literally just $30 a day, because I took the money that I was usually paying to my team of sellers back then that used to do cold emails and cold outreach. I basically took part of that budget, which was $30 a day, and then allocated that towards Facebook ads instead. So if you have something in that range as well of about $30 a day that you can just simply run Facebook ads. So, run Facebook ads, and then after that, what you want to do is you want to send people either to an instant form or a web opt-in. Whichever you prefer to do, doesn't really matter. The only thing is that with the web opt-in, the actual cost per lead and the cost per appointment typically is going to be a little bit higher because there is a bit more resistance for people to fill out a form on the landing page compared to them filling it out on the actual instant form, because instant form is right directly on the platform in a sense, right? I usually would advise to start off with instant forms so that you can start getting as many leads as possible and have more volume of leads that you can call to and schedule appointments. And then after that, build a bit more friction in the funnel by sending people to a landing page with an opt-in instead. And in theory, also basically increase the quality as well. So once the lead comes in, you then want to have a Zapier automation that sends people to a Google Sheet, also puts them on Go High Level, and then also sends a message on Slack or Discord with notification that the new lead came in. So really the idea would be that when a lead comes in from the Facebook ad, they either fill out the Facebook form, which is the instant form, or they fill it out on your landing page. And then once that happens, it then triggers a Zapier automation where Zapier goes ahead and takes a lead, puts it into a spreadsheet, also sends a message to your team on Slack or Discord, notifying the setter that the new lead came in, and also put that lead on Go High Level. So this way the setter immediately goes on the spreadsheet and opens up Go High Level and actually calls a lead right away to have a conversation with them and capture them while they're still on the phone. And so that's the entire idea, right? So the seller calls them and qualifies them and then goes and books a call on the calendar. And once the call is booked in, also call 24 hours before the sales call begins and 1 to 2 hours before the sales call begins in order to actually reconfirm the attendance of the call as well and reschedule if necessary, okay? And so really the script that my seller, for example, uses is this one right here, which I'm going to attach right below this video in the description section, so you can just literally steal it right after. But it's extremely simple, where the seller just simply has a couple of sections where there is the hook stage, then there is the qualification stage, and then really from there on out, if the prospect is qualified or not qualified, they will either book them in or they will disqualify them, right? So it's very simple, where they basically call out whether this is so-and-so name and then ask them how they're doing. Then from there on out, mention what was the offer that they opted in for, and then mention that we only have a couple more spots left. Are you interested to book in a session? And if they say yes, then of course that's where the seller gives the expectations that, hey, look, this call, you don't need to make any decisions on this phone call. Instead, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and, ask you a couple questions today, and then schedule in your actual strategy call with our client service director. And then you include your name right there. If you have closers, then include the closer's name. And that's where they will walk you through all the pricing, all the details and things like that. Does that sound good? And then the prospect says yes. And then of course, this is where the seller then goes through absolutely all the qualifiers, such as why did they reach out to us? What are they looking, what are they in hopes of, getting out from this, right? What is their current situation in the business? What are the current challenges? What's the goal? What's keeping them from getting to that goal? So kind of like have a mini discovery, which qualifies a lead. You can see where that's right now, builds rapport. And then after that, if the prospect is not qualified, then just tell them that flat out like, hey, you're not qualified. Here's the reason why, and then just send a call. But if they're not qualified, then go ahead and basically tell them that, okay, beautiful, let's schedule in the appointment. And so that's where the seller is then going to take a look at the calendar, see what availabilities you or your team has for meeting with that prospect. And then from there on out, figure out the date and the time, set the event, send it to them. Also on the phone, ensure that they receive the invite and it's actually on the email, right, and on the calendar. From there on out, also set expectations that, hey, look, before you show up, we need you to take a look at a pre-call resource, which is going to walk you through exactly how we help businesses in so-and-so niche scale using AI. And would you have the time to take a look at that before the meeting, right? So you got to get that reconfirmation with them. So this way, before the prospect hops in a sales call with you, they're significantly more nurtured. Yeah, from there on out, the prospect says that, yes, I'll take a look at the video. I got the invite, looking forward to speaking with your team. Then that's where the seller obviously concludes the call and basically wraps it up in a sense, right? So like I said, if you want this script, I'm going to attach it right below this video. You can, access it right there. But that's the entire idea. That's the actual strategy that the seller uses to actually book appointments. And if you want a little bit more of an in-depth guide on exactly how to use Facebook ads to actually book calls for your AI agency, then you will actually find another video that I'll attach somewhere in the description section down below, where it was a whole Facebook ad tutorial where I walk you through exactly the setup that I'm using right now to book upwards of 10 meetings every single week with prospects for my marketing agency. So that's really the process to use. Now, when it comes down to hiring these setters, here is what I really found. The best place where I found to hire these setters from is from Argentina. And the reason being is because, people that are extremely hardworking, but then also the labor is very, very cheap. And they're also very close to the US time zone. They practically are in the US time zone, right? And so, what happens is that the way how you can actually find these setters, the best way how I've found to do that is through also using Facebook ads. And you don't need a huge budget for this. You can just run it for a couple days at $10 a day for like 3-4 days, spend like 30, 40, 50 bucks, and you'll get a bunch of applicants come through that you can then go ahead and obviously interview further. Now, this is the way how the ad creator looks like. This is the one that we use when we hire setters. So you can just copy the exact same one as well, where you just simply mention that you're hiring a remote appointment setter, and that's literally it. And then obviously have the ad copy where it explains a little bit more about the role. But the idea is that they click on the actual ad itself. It opens up a landing page, where on the landing page, you want to have a hiring VSL in place. And in the hiring VSL, you just want to explain the responsibilities of the role, what it's all about, what's the pay, what is going to be their day-to-day tasks and all this sort of stuff. And then below that video, basically have a button that sends them to a form where they need to fill out a questionnaire and actually, send their application. So some of the questions that we, for example, ask is, first name, last name, email, phone number, what's their age, also a link to their social media so that we can get in touch with them, what time zone, or more stuff like what country are they based in. We ask that question in case if you might be running ads in other countries as well, but if you're running just in Argentina, you can just simply skip that question. What is your current role and occupation? Are you a student or unemployed or employed, or what's kind of like the situation, right? What past experience they have in terms of setting and cold calling, right? And obviously a couple other things you can see right here on the screen. What we've seen is that you don't necessarily need somebody who has experience in setting in the past, whether that's through cold calling or DMing or whatever. What we found to be one of the most important things when it comes down to hiring the right setter for actually calling leads is somebody who has a obviously good microphone, but then also more importantly, somebody who actually is somewhat like extroverted, you can kind of say, or maybe not necessarily extroverted, but more of like somebody who is very pleasant to speak to. Somebody that, doesn't stutter a lot, somebody that is very, kind of like pronounces the words extremely well and things like that, right? So somebody who is very pleasant to speak to, those typically are the best setters that we have found, because everything else you can teach them in terms of how to handle objections, the script to use, which is obviously this one and all this sort of stuff, right? But if you have somebody who has experience in the past of, doing cold calling or, cold DMing or whatever, but they don't necessarily have the right communication skills, then you can do any training you want. It's not really going to work. So that's the idea, okay? So once people obviously come through, take a look at the application, analyze them, and then the best ones, hop on and actually interview with them and analyze even further. And so the last point is how to actually pay them and how to incentivize them. The best way how I've found to do that is to have a base salary of $400 a month. We usually pay that bi-weekly or weekly in some instances with some setters. Have that as a base for them, but then also have a performance fee, which is $10 per qualified show-up call. So that basically incentivizes the setter to go ahead and book as many qualified calls on the calendar, because they get paid extra for all the additional qualified calls that they book that also show up, okay? So this way, the incentives are aligned, meaning that the more calls you have on a calendar that show up and are qualified, the more money you make, and also the more money they make as well, right? And so really what's very important is that you want to provide all this necessary training to the setter through obviously the script in a sense, right? But then also every single day, you want to meet with the setter for 30 minutes to actually have training calls where you do some role plays, you review some calls and things like that, right? And then of course you also want to do some call reviews and send feedback outside of these calls as well, so that this way they get enough support, right? And so through doing this, the setter performs at a very high level, and it actually gets to a point where you're booking a decent amount of appointments, exactly how we're doing right here in my agency at the moment in a sense, right? Now, if you're interested to work with me one-on-one, then you will actually find a link in the description section down below where you can apply for one-on-one mentorship with me on exactly, how I scale my own agency to $50,000 per month at the moment. And I'll walk you through this step-by-step structure on exactly how, I've done it so that you can replicate it as well. So that's what you're interested in, then you will find the link down below. But with that being said, guys, I hope that you found this video valuable. If you have any questions, let me know. Drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.